Today is full of opportunity to connect with others, grow as a community, and even improve lives. And AARP is in Nevada, helping to make it all happen, with resources to help you steer clear of fraud, helping to make our community accessible for all, and fun and educational events all over our state. Because AARP has real value for you, your family, and for everyone in Nevada. So let's take on today together. Learn more at facebook.com/AARPNV. Welcome back, everybody, to the Nevada Voices podcast from AARP Nevada. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about veterans. Yes, the men and women that served our country. And you might not know how much AARP is doing to engage with veterans and our members who are veterans and the community overall. And for that, we bring in a very special guest for us today. And that, of course, is Peter Jeffries, National Engagements Director for AARP. Peter, thank you for joining us here in Nevada.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what you do. Now, the Veterans Program at AARP and what you do for outreach is relatively new, just a few years old. Tell everybody a little bit about why AARP decided to focus more on veterans and to do more in our communities around our veterans.
Well, number one, we want to thank people for their service and sacrifice because it's not just the veteran or the service person, him or herself. It's everybody around them. So we actually call it the Veterans, Military, and Their Families Strategic Initiative. We wanted to be more deliberate and intentional in the way that we went about doing outreach and engagement nationwide. The short story is, if you put up where some of AARP's content expertise is in our local programming and what are the wants and needs of the Veterans, Military, and Families audience, we really marry up very well together.
Yeah, and it's remarkable because obviously we go out when we're in the community here in Nevada, whether it be in Southern Nevada or Northern Nevada, we run into so many folks over 50 and their families, as you mentioned, because we have caregivers, we have all kinds of things we're dealing with, and they have their military hats on, they have their veteran hats on, or they tell us because they're proud of their service. When you're out there engaging with these folks, what's sort of the biggest issues that you're seeing and hearing from veterans and their families?
Well, we are grounded in 4 key areas that we first listened and learned from the Veterans, Military, and Families audience of what was most pressing in their life's transitions. And, you know, when it comes to a military life and then moving into veteran status, it's all about life's transitions. And even then, it could be 5, 6, 7 years ago after you left service, you're probably going through another part of life's transitions. So our 4 areas of focus rest on caregiving, family caregiving. Think about that as far as there are 5 million family caregivers that dedicate themselves to the veterans and military audience today. Secondly is fighting fraud through our Operation Protect Veterans program, which hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit more in a bit. Third is about re-careering through our work and jobs initiative, as well as Work Reimagined, because again, life's transitions, that's one of the big ones for when folks come out of active duty service, they're transitioning into civilian life. What's the number one thing they're thinking about? The paycheck. And so we have some really good tools and resources that we like to provide there. And then last but not least, while we may not have the content expertise on all things Veterans Affairs benefits, that's a question that we get a lot. So we use one of the things that AARP does very well at the local level, which is we try to create local collaborations with those experts in the VA benefits field so that we can do free forums, we can do symposiums, we can even do telephone town halls with them. But to, again, provide information when people need it and where they are at that given time.
Well, that's excellent. And let's talk a little bit about what you mentioned first, which is caregiving, because one of the things that we know, not only do we have aging veterans, right? So the greatest generation that are still around, also Vietnam veterans and so on, and we also have younger folks that served in the military. You know, we've just been through a period of time where we had multiple deployments in areas, in hotspots, in war zones, Afghanistan, Iraq. So we have younger members of the military who are now veterans, and their families are caring for them. So when we focus and we help these families, Peter, we're not just focused on veterans over 50, correct? We're focused on their families who can be younger, but also on veterans themselves who are younger, correct?
Our caregiving portfolio is vast, and it is intergenerational. So you may be talking to a veteran, him or herself, in one of our Careversations or Prepare to Care forums at the local VFW hall, for instance. But typically, it's not just the veteran that's participating in that event. It's also their caregiver, who could be a spouse. Oftentimes, it's one of their offspring. And so one thing that we did, working with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which is is out there, and they actually started the Elizabeth Dole Foundation because of the big need for more critical services and supports when it came to veteran caregivers. We worked with them to produce this military caregiving guide. And let me tell you, when it hit the street about 6 months ago, it's like hot potatoes. People are coming to us now, both in person as well as they're coming to our unique website, which is aarp.org/veterans. And right there, prominently displayed in the top right corner, you can click on that and download this military caregiving guide. Right. One thing that's really cool about it is you flip into it about page 20 or page 30 and 31 is where it starts. At every one of our caregiving forums that we do for veterans and military families, they immediately flip to this section. And it's a checklist. And it's just the basic X's and O's of when you start your caregiving journey.
Right.
Here's some of the basic things that you as a family need to talk through to enhance that caregiving journey and make it most successful as possible. So the checklists are in here.
And Peter, just to interrupt you for a second, because I think that's the biggest thing we hear from people, especially when I'm out and I hear from veterans and their families and caregivers is, look, I didn't know what I needed to do until it was heaped upon me. So suddenly you find yourself in a position that you have to become a caregiver and you just don't know where to start. And so I think a lot of folks, they look at AARP and they might know us for some of the things like insurance supplements and all that. What they don't understand, especially for veterans and their families, is that we have these free resources. Not only, like you said, can you download it, and you can see the web address, we have it printed at the bottom of this screen and on the description of this podcast, but you can also get it mailed to you too, right? If you want a hard copy. And when we're out there in the community, we're always giving these out as well.
Absolutely. In fact, you hit the nail on the head when you said you really don't know what you're getting into, and it's usually thrust upon you. I was a veteran caregiver myself. My dad, who was a Korean War Army combat vet, and when he got into his later years, basically started suffering from Lewy body dementia. And so my sister and I, we worked together to provide the care he needed at that very time. It wasn't necessarily that we asked for it, but it came to us. And so to be able to have just, again, free resources, tools at your disposal, we highly encourage people to go to that aarp.org/veterans website, download it, or as you say, call your local AARP office, get one of these, because it really will provide some aid and comfort, at least on what are the next couple of things I really need to do to get my head around this task that's ahead.
Right. And again, we're speaking with Peter Jeffries, National Engagements Director for AARP on the national level. We're talking specifically about the veterans programs here, helping veterans, military, and their families. And Peter, one of the things too that unfortunately we see so much of, and it's a growing problem, is in the area of fraud. We see specific fraudulent activities, crooks and criminals who target the men and women who serve this country so bravely and so selflessly. Talk a little bit about that and what we're doing to protect veterans in the way of fraud.
Let me drop this statistic on you and the listeners. Veterans and military families are twice as likely as the civilian population to be targeted by con artists.
Twice as likely
than the civilian population. And when AARP did research, public research, and we found that, we immediately then started working with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. We created an awareness program called Operation Protect Veterans, and it was simply, we had to get the word out and get the word out fast. We launched that on Veterans Day 2017. It's only grown since then. And talking about our free resources and tools and guides, we put together this little brochure here. It's called the AARP Watchdog Alert Handbook, Veterans Edition, and we list on a regular basis what are those top handful of scams, schemes, bogus operations that are coming through a veteran or military family phone, doorstep, email. Those are the most prominent ways that scammers are trying to get you.
Yeah, and let's share what some of those are. For example, benefits buyout scam. Scammers offer upfront payment of cash in exchange for veterans' future disability or pension. Charging for records, investment pension scam, Veterans Choice Program. Of course, veterans are familiar with that. Also, identity theft, so VA phishing scams, as well as employment scams. Because like you said, a lot of folks are out there trying to find work after they get back into civilian life.
Let me highlight those first two that you mentioned, and that's exactly why we list those two at the beginning of the Watchdog Alert Handbook, is benefits buyout scam. Somebody calls you and says that they're working with XYZ Enterprise and they can give you a lump sum payment up front as long as you give them your Social Security number. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just give us that Social Security number. We'll take care of the rest, and we'll give you a lump sum payout of X amount. Never, ever fall for that. The reason is, number one, you may never even see any money coming your way. But secondly, if you do, it is significantly smaller than what you duly deserve for wearing that military uniform. The second one, charging for records, let's just be very clear on this one. A veteran should never have to pay for their records. Again, on this one, we've heard where scammers or con artists pretend to be from the VA and that they're quote unquote updating their records and need you to give them some sort of personal information, which is simply a back door into your financial records that all of a sudden they're going to steal right out of your bank account. And you should never have to, if you're a veteran, there might be very small instances, but it would be a nominal fee. The number one thing to do there, contact your local Veterans Affairs office and schedule an appointment with them. They'll be able to produce your records, and it's free of charge.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, other things too, GI Bill education marketing scams. So folks who are taking advantage of the GI Bill for college courses, their target to these deceptive marketing practices. Of course, special deals for veterans, that's just general scams, rental scams. And really, the couple tips you mentioned is just never give your information, especially your Social Security number. I mean, that goes without saying. You don't need to give anybody your Social Security number if you're a veteran, unless you're sitting at a VA office or somewhere where you can verify who you're talking to, correct?
Absolutely. You know, the two things that schemers try to get out of the veteran or the veteran family are two things. Social Security number one. Secondly is the ID number on one's discharge papers, the DD-214.
Yeah.
And those two things, if a scammer or a con artist gets that, game over. They are raiding your bank account before you can even call your local bank to say stop payment.
Right. And that's why these resources are so valuable, Peter. Again, Peter Jeffries, National Engagements Director for AARP, talking about our veterans program here at AARP, veterans, military, and their families, not just the veterans themselves. And lastly, Peter, we want to talk about the third piece you mentioned early on, which was around helping folks get work, right? Helping folks as they transition back into civilian life. What are we doing there? What resources, what opportunities do we help with them and their families to make sure that they can provide for themselves when they get out?
One thing really exciting coming out this month is at our AARP AARP.org/veterans website is a couple of sections down on our webpage. You can click that and get over to our work and jobs section, of which we're launching a new job board. And the job board is neat because it will take a veteran's information, i.e. resume, that they upload on one side, and then connect it to those employers that are looking specifically to hire veterans. So we're using technology to match people for their wants, interests, and needs from both the one seeking employment to the employer, so that we can again better serve a veteran and military family audience.
That's just remarkable. And like you said, the website, again, give the website out, www.aarp.org/veterans.
/veterans.
Correct. We have it listed down below in the description of this podcast. Also, if you're watching the video, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you might be watching the video, you can also see the URL below you as well. So here's the thing I would ask you, Peter, in closing, before we let you go, and you're off to do more to help our veterans and their families, is what else can people do when if they have a friend or a family member who's in need of, whether it be caregiving or just someone to watch over them? What can they do to kind of make sure that they're doing their part to help those that served us?
Again, we park all of our resources, our free tools and resources at aarp.org/veterans. But one of the biggest things to truly support the sacrifice of our veterans and military families is to engage them. Open up discussion, talk to them, because you could have a neighbor next door down the street, a family member that they need to have more of that social interaction, social environment, and just through face-to-face or phone call conversations, you'll be able to pick up on what are some of their needs at that given time. And believe me, it's not just AARP out there in this space.
Sure.
We have some particular content expertise, as we talked about, on caregiving, fighting fraud, Operation Protect Veterans, on work and jobs and recareering. But there are a vast other number of folks that are in this market space. Just be able to ask for help. That's another thing, is that too often veterans are either say, I don't deserve that stuff. Yes, you do. You earned it. You put on that uniform. You stood and protected the American flag. So it's just one small way that a grateful nation can help to repay you. Secondly, there are organizations in your very community that are dedicated to helping you. And so just again, raise your hand, ask for help if you need help. Otherwise, just go ahead and get into a conversation with your neighbor, with a family member who's put on the uniform, because you never know what you're going to discover.
Amazing. And Peter, let me ask you this question in closing. You mentioned your father served. My grandfather served. Talk about, for you as a professional, how personally, how meaningful this has been in driving this program for AARP and interacting, because you're all over the country dealing with veterans and their families. Talk a little bit about that and what it's meant for you.
I can tell you that it's both the most personally as well as professionally fulfilling thing that I've ever done. When we're in the community holding these free forums, or we're doing caregiving prepare to care events, you really do see where we are helping to change lives for the better. I'll give you a quick example. We were down in Columbus, Georgia, and as I said before, we may not have the content expertise about all the ins and outs as it comes to VA benefits, but that's where we want to leverage the connectedness and the collaboration that we have in different communities. So we were working with a veteran service organization that's pretty prominent in the Southeast, and they came in. AARP, we opened up with here's some of the basic resources that we have, and we turned it over to this other group. They walked through their whole thing, particularly talking about the aid and attendance benefit, which for most veterans, you probably qualify for it. It's just that people don't know about it. Very much like the Fraud Watch, Operation Protect veterans things we were talking about is that you just didn't know about that veterans and military families are twice as likely than civilians to get scammed, or at least to be targeted. And at the end of this caregiving forum that ended in a veterans benefits discussion, a 98-year-old World War II veteran in a wheelchair raised his hand, and he said, I want to thank AARP for putting on this free forum. I learned so much today that I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get out of it, but by golly, I'm going to call my local VA office and start working on this because I clearly qualify for those benefits.
That's amazing, and that's where you see just the connection, and that's what AARP has done so well, I believe, not only with this program, but with a lot of what we do, which is connect the pieces together for people. So we tend to be a rallying point, to use this military term, to get people out there. So that's fascinating that we're able to do that. And
I like to say that we do the three C's very well. We like to be the convener of the conversation. We like to over-communicate with the 50-plus crowd, and in this case, with an intergenerational audience.
Absolutely.
Because it's the entire family involved. And last but not least is that we like to be a strong community collaborator.
That's perfect. Well, Peter, just a great job that you and the team, because it is a team, it's an entire team across the country, as well as state offices, including here in Nevada, where you're out here. We're going to be doing some training of our volunteers to help with some of these programs. So we appreciate you being with us and for taking the time today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
All right, that was Peter Jeffries, National Engagement Director for AARP, of course, overseeing and driving our veterans program. Again, the website, aarp.org/veterans. You can see it below in the video. If you're listening to the podcast, you can see the description. There's a link right there. Make sure you check it out. If you know veterans, if you know families who have veterans in them, make sure you pass it on. Lots of free resources there. So we appreciate you guys all being here. All right, well, that does it for this edition of Nevada Voices, the AARP podcast. We'll be back next time. We appreciate it. Again, thanks to Peter Jeffries, and thanks to all of you for listening and watching. We'll talk to you.